Right, well, welcome to this session, which is the future of digital advertising. There'll be lots of questions, obviously, throughout the session. The first one of which is, why on earth am I here? What have I got to do with digital advertising in any form? And the answer is, really, that before I started doing Mock the Week or Outnumbered or whatever it is that I am now in, straight out of university in a kind of secret career, I worked for Unilever. So I was, for 7 years, a Unilever brand manager. I was the brand manager of Lynx deodorant. I'm responsible for the smell of many of your teenagers' bedrooms, and I can only apologize for that, which gives me a sort of in, because I spent a lot of time working out costs per thousands and buying media and working out how best to promote my brand, which was pretty successful. I had other incredibly unsuccessful brands as well. I launched probably the shortest-lived toothpaste in Unilever history, which was a toothpaste called Mentadent Gel, which was a children's version of an aniseed-tasting toothpaste, which wasn't terribly good, but was really killed by my signing off the strapline, Mentadent Gel, be chums with your gums. It's really not. Wasn't great. But it does at least give me an in to the world that we are talking about now. The world in which I advertised things was a completely different world. It wasn't the world in which children's major worry is whether they have Wi-Fi. It was completely different. We didn't have any of that kind of stuff. I've also worked on the creative side, so I've written ads, and I've also spent a lot of time while I was working writing straplines for things that just made me laugh. My favorite ones were, we've got surprises in store, the escalator's broken and the staff know fuck all. Remember, if you can find our products cheaper anywhere else, we will find the store and we will burn it down. And finally, Dove deodorant, because no one likes a smelly dove. Anyway, so there you go. But the purpose of this session, obviously, is much more serious than that. The world of advertising is changing very, very rapidly. And everyone, I think, is finding it quite difficult to work out where they are in it or how to deal with it. But to set the scene for this, would you please welcome Jacob Rosenzweig from BCG, who's going to take you through the basics of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Hugh. I won't be as funny, just letting you know. First, maybe a quick detour to the 1950s. Right, back in the early 1950s, if you wanted to buy an ad, you pretty much had to go to a newspaper or a magazine. Then, in 1955, the very first TV advert aired, and TV advertising boomed. For the next 5 years, it took tremendous share from print. Then, suddenly and curiously, the TV growth stalled, and print managed to hold share for the next 40 years. We could be at a similar time with digital video advertising, which has dramatically grown over the past 5 years. Will that rise continue, or will TV hold share? In preparation for this session, we at BCG published a report looking into these questions. And in about 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to take you rapidly through some of our findings. So, continuing the story in 2001, you can see that digital, over the last 15 years, has become the dominant advertising medium in the UK. And it's come almost entirely at the expense of print. And TV, well, the good news is it's held flat. But the bad news is, if digital wants to keep growing, it can only come from one place, and that's TV. Zooming in on digital video in particular, while it's still just about 1/5 the size of the TV ad market, it's been growing at about 75% per year over the last 5 years. And major advertisers like Coca-Cola and Unilever are spending huge sums on digital video around the world. In fact, our analysis shows that while digital video gets just 8% of viewing time, it's getting 15% of ad share. Advertisers are clearly potentially valuing digital more than TV. In fact, one advertiser told us for the study, no one is getting fired for spending more money on digital. But is it worth it? Well, there's quite a lot of research on advertising effectiveness. We read about 100 reports for our study. And digital does perform well, in particular when it comes to data and targeting. But TV in the reports was clearly advantaged on most categories, things like reach, engagement, context, and even long-term return on investment. That's great news for TV, but it does beg the question, why aren't you getting your fair share? Of course, the news this year hasn't been great for digital. Starting in January, when Mark Pritchard from P&G said that the digital supply chain was murky at best and fraudulent at worst. Continuing with viewability and metrics challenges at Facebook. Studies which showed that a large percentage of digital ads are actually seen by robots and not by people. And of course, the brand safety issues, which I'm sure we'll hear a lot from on the panel from Alexi. But does it matter? So we spoke to a lot of advertisers, and yes, some of them told us that they've started to shift spend back to TV. But the vast majority said that this is just digital in its uni years, and that over the next couple of years, they will sort these issues out. One thing that's clear is TV and digital are not standing still, and they're heading towards each other. Digital players are announcing huge budgets for original content, including things like sports that drives huge audiences. And several of you in this room are investing as well to match the digital players in data and targeting capabilities. So who will be the winner? Well, in our study, we believe that TV companies can be the winners, but it will require big changes. And we highlighted 4 things. 1, defend content rights and protect especially the shows that drive mass reach, although this will be a challenge given the increasing budgets. 2, continue to invest in digital services and data. While the companies like Sky and Channel 4 have been doing good things, there's still a fair amount to go to match what Google and Facebook can do. 3, you should build a walled garden around quality video inventory in much the same way that Google has done with search. And finally, and maybe most importantly, you need to prove your worth and reassert the value of TV, not only with CMOs, but also with CEOs and CFOs of the big advertisers. So that's my point of view. I think I'll hand back over to Hugh and the panel to hear what they have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jacob. We also have a small vox pop to set the scene.
Hello from San Francisco. The first issue we're going to talk about is lessons from the brand safety crisis. And I'm going to skip all the obvious ones and get to the one that I think is most important to you guys. And I'm afraid I have bad news. I don't think this is going to be a boon to the broadcast industry. I really don't think that brands and agencies care that much about this issue, despite all the posturing and play acting.
The recent issues around brand safety in the digital space, especially with Google and Facebook, have given us lots of things to ponder. I mean, the first one is, how do we, in the digital age, keep our customers safe and secure, their data safe and secure, and how does our advertising arrive in an appropriate environment? And I think, actually, I can guarantee that we have now rattled the cages of both Google and Facebook to really focus on safety in a way they might not have been before.
If I were a broadcaster, there would be spots all over TV, there would be billboards all over the city telling people how to download ad blockers, because the public hates online advertising, and I think the best thing that the broadcasters can do as a marketing program is to tell people how to avoid online advertising.
I think they're going to find themselves increasingly under pressure to make VOD work as well, and video on demand features in many a media schedule, in fact in every media schedule that anybody's presented to me, without necessarily having any real metrics around efficacy, but what the metrics do show is the extent of reach among a particular target audience. So how are broadcasters going to get themselves into that same space? An open challenge.
The answer to who wins the war is the person who delivers the best programming. The best content will win because delivery systems are becoming completely irrelevant to consumers.
Not clear to me yet which one's going to be the winner, but I think both sides in this particular game have got a lot to learn from each other. And I think whoever can focus best on customer outcomes is going to be the long-term winner.
That's obviously what we are going to discuss, and I have with me a fantastic panel, and they are Alexi Mostrous, who is the head of investigations at The Times. We have Ben McOwen Wilson, too many surnames, Director YouTube EMEA. We have Kelly Williams, Managing Director of ITV Commercial, and Nicki Brown, Ad Controller for Argos. So welcome to you all. Now, if I can start with you, Alexi, because you are really the reason why this is on the agenda today, aren't you? Because you were the person who effectively exposed the problems at YouTube and the brand safety issues. So can you fill us in on what you found?
We didn't set out to investigate YouTube or Facebook. We set out to investigate media agencies because we've been told that they were basically ripping off clients, taking secret rebates and doing other dodgy business deals. We got hold of an internal document a couple of weeks later from one top 6 media agency, which showed that, yes, rebates were coming in, but actually there was this big chunk of money being made through programmatic advertising. And that wasn't being billed as fees, that was a sort of separate line. And the source said, this is kind of dark income because the clients don't really know where the ads are going. And so once we had that, it was quite an easy process to look at where inappropriate ads were turning up. And it just happened that the platform on which the majority of these ads were turning up on ISIS supporting videos, on Al-Shabaab supporting videos, on hate preacher videos, was YouTube. And then it went from there.
And Ben, it just so happens that you work for YouTube. What a coincidence.
Yep.
So, I mean, presumably you have taken all that on board. Now, how are you responding to those brand safety issues?
So we absolutely have. And I'll follow Nicola. There's no place on YouTube for terrorist content. There really is no place for terrorist content on YouTube or hate speech. And we evidently weren't doing a good enough job at identifying that content. Now, in large part, some of that is because of the nature of our platform. We have over 400 hours of new content uploaded onto YouTube every minute. And that means there is not somebody who is reviewing every single hour of content that comes onto our platform. The platform has historically relied on flagging from users of content that is offensive in any way, shape, or form. That's then reviewed by a human within our business, and it's removed. Since the changes that we announced back in March this year were, first of all, actually beginning to deploy machine learning to begin to identify more and more of that terrorist content. So in the last month, 75% of the content that's been removed of that type, hate or violence or extremist content, 75% of the content that's been removed in the last month has been identified by machine. It's then reviewed by a person within our teams across the world and removed. The second thing that we've done is we've worked for many years, since sort of 2013, 2014, with a group of NGO, non-governmental organizations who have concerns about different areas, whether it's child safety or the development of terrorism. We've radically expanded that group of organizations. They essentially, some of them are police bodies, some of them are NGOs. We've expanded that group, specifically targeting groups and development on extremist and terrorist content. They are able to flag multiple videos at the same time. They're still ultimately reviewed by YouTube. It's still ultimately us who makes the decision as to whether they are removed or not. But that accelerates the process of identification of videos.
And
Then,
Alexi, do you think it's worked?
In credit to Google and YouTube, the number of ads now appearing on extremist videos is, in my own opinion, diminished heavily. But there is still a lot of extremist content on the site without ads. I checked a couple of weeks ago, and there was it was very, very easy to get a supportive ISIS video. And what's interesting, and possibly a structural problem for Google, is that the technology, the AI technology that they're using to identify and remove ads from extremist videos is also being used to suggest similarly extremist content to users. So on the ISIS video that I looked at, it was one problem that it was on there in the first place, but the bigger problem in a way was on the right-hand side were 8 or 9 other ISIS videos that was suggested to me by this very, very complex, sophisticated AI system, I think called Google Brain, which YouTube is putting a lot of money into because their entire aim is to increase the viewing time on YouTube, to increase the personalization of YouTube. That is a direct link to their bottom line, to their profits, and that is kind of structurally diametrically opposed to removing content or moderating content.
So in essentially, it's a brand safety issue for you, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you've got to protect your brand.
So absolutely, the removal of the content. And there are two things, in addition to the elements that are specifically targeting removal of content, there are two other things that we've been doing that I think it's worth spending some time on, because one of them is there is plenty of content, some of which Alexi or News Corp and others have identified that isn't illegal content. It's pretty unpleasant content, but it's not illegal. And what we've also...
Any of it for Bell Pottinger?
Well, so look, you may joke, but we get plenty of content that is offensive to UK eyes, but I also manage a team in Turkey. We had our platforms closed down in Turkey because the government there found elements of content on our platform offensive. Again, the High Court in the end in Turkey ruled in our favor because it wasn't illegal content. And we are not, either in the UK or in Turkey or anywhere else in the world, in the business of being anybody's censor. And that's quite important for people to understand. So what we have done, what we have committed to do, is where there is that content that is absolutely not illegal, but is pretty unpleasant and none of us would want to sit there and watch it. First thing is, there are no ads running against it, as News Corp have found. And second thing is, what we've now done is begun to remove some of that juicing that our platform naturally does. So turning off comments, turning off likes, turning off the ability to share, turning off that recommendation engine. And in addition to that, we're working with, I don't know how many people have heard of it, but the redirect program. So as people are searching for, entering search terms that are related to signing up for ISIS, that actually we're able to push to them sensible content around actually why some of those is kind of counter-narrative against signing up for terrorism. So absolutely trying to fix for brand advertisers, but actually more broadly on our platform, trying to ensure, number one, any content that absolutely shouldn't be there isn't there, and where it is, that we're able to control.
And does that work for advertisers? Are you happier now?
We definitely are happier. I mean, taking Bob's comments, I love Bob Hoffman. I would totally agree with one of the things he said and totally disagree with one of the other things he said. I do think that advertisers really do care about brand safety. It's important. The last thing we want to do is offend the general public or our customers. And so it's really important. When this happened, we worked very closely with Google, both directly and through ISBA, the Voice of British Advertisers. And the steps that Google implemented have helped us feel more confident. And the truth is, we're still monitoring this carefully and will continue to do so. What I agree with Bob on, though, is that I agree that this probably isn't going to be a massive boon for television, because I think two things. I think one is that the budgets that go into video haven't come from television, so they're not naturally going to move into television. And I also think that television and the way it's bought, significantly in advance, making it quite hard to buy it last minute, also is going to make it very hard. So, I disagree that advertisers don't care, but I do agree.
But YouTube and digital has other problems, doesn't it? It's not just brand safety, is it? There's also there's viewability,
Yeah.
there's fraud,
Yeah.
there's overclaiming. So
Yeah.
if you, Bob Hoffman has a quote in the Ad Contrarian which goes, this is a quote, Facebook discovers 300,000 invisible Swedes. So according to a recently published report, Facebook says they reached 1.5 million Swedes between the ages of 15 to 24. The problem is that Sweden only has 1.2 million Swedes between the ages of 15 and 24. So
Yeah.
there's that.
Yeah, there is that.
Does that worry you? And does it worry? What about bots? And
Yeah, I mean,
accounting?
that does worry advertisers. If you pay for something, you should receive it, and I do think that the industry has to work much harder to fix it. I appreciate it's a big challenge. I think, though, there's a fundamental difference between the type of advertiser you are as to how big a problem this is for you. So if you are an advertiser who has good customer data, then you are less reliant on viewability figures to evaluate the efficiency of your digital advertising. If you have no customer data, you are paying for a service, and viewability is one of the few measures you have to assess the value of that service. If you're an advertiser who has sales data, you can look at how much revenue you're driving from a particular strand of activity, and if it's not doing very well, you can optimize to things that are doing well, and that's one of the ways that Argos gets around it. I mean, ideally we wouldn't need a workaround. Ideally the industry would be in a good place, but we can work around it in that way. Presumably bots aren't buying things from us, so
No, but they're costing you money, aren't they? Because they are making sites look more attractive that you're paying for advertising on.
But I'm advertising on sites where I drive a lot of revenue, and therefore that's probably moving my investment away from bots and away from... So I'm in a very fortunate position. There are lots of advertisers who don't have that kind of data and can't do that. And in any event, it is something the industry needs to address. But I do think there is a little bit of a difference in data driving how important it is.
And Kelly, do you feel the same? Do you think, in fact, it's not going to make any difference, the doubts about digital advertising? Does it help broadcast advertising?
Well, look, I think, look, as technology changes and businesses have to cope with technology shifts, I think the way businesses work, or the practices of businesses will change, but I think principles should remain. And I think when you look at those four big issues that Jacob summarised, of viewability and brand safety and non-human traffic and transparency, they're four massive issues that I think do contradict the basic fundamental principles of marketing. If you can't see an ad, what is the point of marketing? And I think the thing that surprises me, and look, this isn't Nicki, I'm just talking about generally amongst advertisers, is when I've ever worked with marketing directors, they are all, extremely passionate and understandably very protective about their brands, as you probably were at Lynx. And people spend, they spend millions, if not billions, building those brands. And the thing with online advertising for me that kind of strikes me is that they're then prepared to hand over the welfare of that brand to an algorithm that they don't necessarily understand. And I think a lot of advertisers now are starting to recognise that and to kind of wake up to those issues. I think P&G, as Jacob said at the beginning, Mark Pritchard, stood up at the end of last year and was the first to kind of really admit, look, we steered too far in that direction, and we're starting to see them steer a little bit back towards television.
But there is an issue, isn't there? So the World Federation of Advertisers, which is an American organisation, I think, who said that 30% of all online ads are never seen by a human.
Yeah.
Right. So they're watched by bots, which are clicking and pushing the price up. And unless if the world is going to be run by AI, maybe things that aren't human are the things that you need to be selling to. But I would doubt it.
Yeah.
But why is that? How is that different? That seems to support the broadcast advertising argument, doesn't it? But if you're watching broadcast advertising, does anybody watch that? I should think I watch less than 30% of adverts. I go and make a cup of tea, or I fast forward it.
Yeah, but the ad's still viewable. It's not the issue around viewability. Often people confuse viewability with engagement. The issue around television is when you buy an ad on television, the whole ad can be seen on the screen, and you're only charged if someone or if Barb reports a commercial impact against that. You know, if you're not in the room, you're not engaged with it. So, but I think viewability and engagement are two different things. But look, I think the extent of this problem it kind of is illustrated by the fact that the IPA and ISBA, representing agencies and advertisers, just like 3 weeks ago, published an open letter to I believe Facebook and YouTube, asking for urgent action across all of these areas. But I think historically platforms like YouTube and Facebook have kind of distanced themselves from the actual content on their sites. They pitch themselves as platforms rather than media owners or publishers. And I talk about Facebook rather than YouTube, since Ben's sat over there. But I think it's very difficult to sound sincere, as I think Nicola sounded on that. But I think it's very difficult to sound sincere that you're taking this serious when literally week after week Facebook are publishing or getting basic research wrong. You know, the example you just showed. There's a more extreme one. There was a tweet the other day from a business in the Christmas Islands who he posted a screenshot of a Facebook claim that they could reach 55,000 people in the Christmas Islands, and there's a population of just less than 2,000.
The irony, of course, is if they'd Googled that, they would have got it right.
He did say if you wanted to reach everyone in the Christmas Islands, you just need to post it in the window of the post office. But, but look, I actually think, I think it's very difficult to sort brand safety out on YouTube because there's so much. It's almost impossible, I think, to guarantee brand safety on YouTube because so much content is put up there. So much of it is unregulated user-generated content. So I think brands have to advertise on YouTube with their eyes open and take that risk. And
I'm interested in the first part, the thing that led you to the discovery of brand safety in the first place. What is the issue with media agencies?
If you look at the kind of the middle space between the client and the publisher, it's an incredibly complex, opaque environment with hundreds of different kind of companies all doing different things that no one is, at least from the outside, is aware of. And a lot of those companies are owned by big agencies. And what seems to be the case is that the clients will often only have visibility in one stage of the contract. So they'll know what their contract says with the agency, but they won't know what the agency is contracted to in terms of how much it buys media from its subsidiary agency. And so you have this big opacity when you take it past just one single stage. And then if you add to that a kind of monopolistic environment, where this very complex, opaque environment is controlled by the big six agencies, but also where Google and Facebook are hugely powerful, then that kind of combination of monopolistic dominance and opacity leads, our sources said, to the potential for ripping off clients.
And I don't quite understand how you buy digital media. Do you buy particular sites? Do you buy swathes of sites? Some of them are terrible and some of them are good? Is it like CDOs that brought down the world financial system?
Well, one person described it as exactly that. There is a process where you can buy a bundle of sites, but the purchase of the sites occurs on an ad network, and that ad network has a particular contract with a programmatic agency, and that programmatic agency kind of trades in the ads that they buy, a bit like a trading desk at a bank, and then that all feeds through to the agency, which kind of tells the client, yeah, we've got you 10,000 eyeballs, but we're not going to tell you how we get them. And in fact, some big agencies have two levels of pricing. One pricing which is higher, where you can see everything that's happening, and one pricing which is lower, where they go, okay, we'll give you a low price, but we won't tell you how we're getting it.
Yeah. So why, and this is a question for all of you really, why does no one mind? Why don't you, as a brand person, as a at Argos, why don't you care?
I don't think it's true that we don't care. I mean, ISBA is, you know, we talk about these sorts of things there regularly. I think the truth is that there is a lack of transparency across the media industry as a whole, and online is the new sort of player in this, and probably it is even murkier, perhaps, than some of the other channels. But this is a long-standing, ongoing challenge for advertisers, media agencies. That you know, that there is occasional progress. There's some work going on in America that may.
And is it? Sure, that's right. Is it also fear of not getting young people? I mean, where else can you advertise to get them? So whatever online is like, is it in a rather rarefied position of being the only way you can get at particular groups of people?
I think whether you're an advertiser, a media owner, or an agency, I think there is a natural innovation digital bias. Again, as Jacob said, you're not going to get fired for being too digital, but you might be fired for being a bit too traditional. And I think media agencies have been under a lot of pressure over the last few years. Their margins on their core business of buying and planning have been eroded as advertisers have pitched their business and agencies have promised to do it for less and less commission, less fees, less payment terms. And they're smart people agencies, and they've looked for other revenue streams, and they've invested in digital. They've built these programmatic systems. They've created these networks. But I think the issue that is now, coming to the front is that the margins in that digital stuff are quite significant and not necessarily transparent. And it calls into question, I think, the objectivity and the neutrality of a media agency, because ultimately they're making the media choices, and if they make a load more money out of pushing an advertiser spend toward digital, some may do that more than they should. And I think what's happening now is that the advertisers are questioning that, and ISBA are supporting that, and this whole issue of transparency is rising to the top. But as I said, I think advertisers are getting on top of it, and as a result, I think we'll see a shift, certainly in some of their spend.
Well, that's what you're hoping, isn't it?
Of course I am, yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly. But it seems to me that the problem, actually, which is transparency and who's watching it and all the rest of it, is actually very solvable for you guys, isn't it? You can just start telling people who's watching it and not sell it to the wrong spaces.
So we already, I'll go back to your just earlier question, if I may, which is around, is one of the reasons why money is moving to digital because of young people? It is. It undeniably is. Television since 2010 has lost 12% of its audience. In young people, it's lost over a third of its audience. And a lot of that young audience is online and is spending more and more time. At the same time, the price of advertising to young people on television is up 57%. That doesn't happen in many markets where actually you get to fail at delivering something and then get to increase the price of it. And that's actually the bigger issue, which is therefore, sure, brands and agencies are therefore looking to engage with that 16 to 35-year-old audience, and they're looking to engage with them on our platform, but on all sorts of other platforms. I think to the question of programmatic, there's a danger at the moment that we're at a place where programmatic equals bad. Right? And everybody in this room will have had a good experience of programmatic. You will have been on a site where you were looking for a gift for your other half and you sort of got halfway through the buying process, and then you go to The Guardian or The Times or to any of the national newspapers in the UK, and an advert for that product comes up the next day. All of us live in a world where advertisers are chasing our eyeballs rather than purely associating their content with their ads with great content. And that's one of the, I think, incredibly positive changes that has happened out of digital advertising. And I think TV, whether it's Sky with their platform, or Channel 4 and ITV and others, are beginning to think about how they make television as a platform more addressable, which is essentially what that is. So how do you make sure that the ad that any one of us sees is an ad that any one of us wanted to see? And I think it would be a real shame if kind of the one thing that this entire audience took out of it was programmatic equals bad. It doesn't. I think it will be a large part of television's future, and it will be potentially one of the things that helps to rescue television advertising on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
And do you want to rescue television advertising on an ongoing basis?
Absolutely. I mean, look, it's all very well saying kind of Google's pulling all this money out, or YouTube is. You know, our business is a pure partnership business. At YouTube, the majority of my revenue goes directly to partners. I pay out 55%, probably shouldn't say that, the press guys will kill me, but I pay out 55% on a standard basis to content creators on our platform. ITV pays out 50% of its revenue. Channel 4 is at 60% ahead of us, and I think BBC is at 56. Those are Ofcom and Enders numbers. So we are paying out in the same way that traditional media partners are paying out to the content creators that are on our platform. At the Google level, last year we paid out $11 billion to publishers and creators across the world. Obviously that's a global number, not a UK number. But our business is entirely premised on helping to deliver digital platforms that make other people successful.
And do you agree with that? Do you think the way for you to progress is?
Yeah,
to
look,
use some of the-
I agree with you. I don't want people to think programmatic is bad. I think the programmatic issue is more around transparency. But look, I think what the brand safety issue that Alexi has highlighted in his articles has done for television is highlight and illustrate the importance of context when you advertise. So, look, television's future, I think, will be certainly helped by addressable. But I think what we have the ability to do in television is, if you have mass marketing at one end of the system and you've got precise targeting at the other, we over the next 5 to 10 years, I suspect, television will build an addressable capability to live alongside our ability to deliver mass audiences within a very brand safe, regulated quality environment. And when you add to that, you know, the fact that viewers accept the value exchange between advertising and content on television, and also when you add in the emotional connection that television has with its viewers, and that's what brands love. They love piggybacking on the back of that emotional contact. And I think television has a very bright future.
Going back to the addressable advertising thing, I mean, I appreciate that it is a very important tool for you and all the rest of it. But what I would, on a personal level, like to know is whether there is any way of stopping the situation where, for example, if I buy a pair of trainers, right? So I go onto a site, I buy a pair of trainers, and then for the next 4 days, I'll get adverts saying, do you want a pair of trainers? Yep. And I think, I've just bought a pair of trainers. It's the worst time to advertise trainers, because I've got trainers. Yep. So what, is there any way around that? You would regard that as magnificently targeted.
If you chose to, you could go and update your ad preferences and say, by the way, I'm no longer in the market for a pair of trainers. I have to tell you, not many people choose to do that on a daily or a weekly basis. But you know, to Nicki's earlier point, the advertisers in that scenario, the reason it stops is not because they're worried that you were actually a bot clicking or viewing their ad. It stops because they have return on investment models that are telling them, you know what, chasing this pair of eyeballs is no longer worthwhile. And that, again, is another reason why digital advertising is
pretty much the story of my life, actually. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, though. But here's an Armageddon possibility, then, right? So the rise of technology has caused this, you know, the rise of internet advertising and all the rest of it. But there is other technology, which is that there are an increasing number of ad blockers and ad skipping programs. And there's also Netflix and SVOD and all that kind of stuff. What is the likelihood that all ad content disappears? Because no one can actually deliver, and young people, well, Amazon can clearly deliver. That's what their business is, mainly delivering. But what happens? What happens? Could all content go? Have they got it right? Or you've got the wrong business model, all of you?
I think that all of us who would like to sustain an ad-funded future for media and video content have to worry about that. We have to worry about it in terms of ad load. We have to worry about it in terms of ad formats. And we are as is YouTube, very, very focused on that because that is our bread and butter. We have created which we've launched in the US, a subscription service which gives people a chance to remove ads. So we're testing, if you like, for ourselves, what is the price point at which consumers would like that and a number of other benefits in it, but essentially making sure we've got an ad-free option. But the other thing we've been doing is, many of you will have seen the skippable ad format, which actually everyone says, I never watch it. Actually, I kind of know how many of you watch it. Funnily enough, that is a bit of data that we get on a pretty regular basis. And if not enough of you were watching those ads and we weren't being able to charge advertisers for it, we would come up with a different format. On mobile phones, today in the UK, 75% of our viewership comes from mobile phones and tablets, and we know that non-skippable 30-second or longer adverts on mobile phones are just not watched. People will stop using our app and they'll go and do something else. So as of the end of this year, there will no longer be 30-second non-skippable adverts on YouTube on many of our platforms for delivery. All the industry needs to worry about that. You need to worry about ensuring that you've got ad models that work not just for the advertisers, but actually also for the consumers who are watching the content.
It is interesting, I think. Sorry, you were...
Sorry, I just wanted to add on the programmatic advertising debate. It can be very, very good for brands, and it can also be very good for the people that are receiving the ads because they are more relevant to them than if they weren't targeted. But we've also got to look at how that targeting works, because it works on the collection and the hoovering up of thousands and thousands of data points on these particular individuals that are served the ads. And it's where that data comes from, how YouTube and Google and Facebook are amassing all that data. That is a very significant question going forward, which has to be set alongside the business opportunities. And I think, I mean, Ben can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Google and Facebook are currently joining in lobbying efforts in the US to allow ISPs to sell and trade data based on internet interactions, which you can have a view about either way, but you can't simply say, well, let's look at programmatic through the filter of whether someone is enjoying that advert. You have to look at the wider social implications around it too.
What they're going to find out about me is that I don't want any trainers. I'm just not interested anymore. I think the interesting thing in this whole thing, really, is going back to Bob Hoffman's point, which is that when ITV was initially set up, I don't know if this is right, but I think this is probably right. We needed more programs. They needed an opposition to the BBC, so they thought, how do we make programs? How do we fund them? We will use advertising as a means of funding it. And then the model flipped completely. So it's now, how do we get advertising? Oh, we'll offer them some programs, right? So has it gone, is content really going to be the key to everything? Does winning the battle for content make all the difference?
Before you get into content, I think there are a few other things. And kind of before we move on there, I think there's been a lot of sort of quite negative language, you know, Armageddon and lots of digital against feeling very sort of adversarial with TV. I totally agree with the point that actually there's a real power for these two channels to build each other. You know, in Argos, 10 years ago, I would make an ad and I would have to use TV to get people to get off their bums and go into an Argos, maybe the next day, maybe, you know, that weekend. Now they don't have to get off their bums. They can do it there and then. And that's the power of TV with digital. And I think it's a massive opportunity for TV as well. You know, and I think there are lots of great examples of work that's being done that takes advantage of that advantage. You know, AdSmart with addressable TV. We're doing some work with Sky Analytics where we do a very similar process with TV to the digital marketing process. We look at where we've served ads, we look at where our revenue has been driven, and we can move our advertising to those places where it gets a better return on TV, which is pretty unheard of. But I think that TV has to embrace these opportunities and look for more of them rather than sort of seeing it totally as a negative. And there are a couple of places where it's not doing such a great job. For example, broadcast of VOD is the only part of the digital landscape where I can't see how much revenue I'm driving. And I just think in today's landscape, to not allow me to put a pixel so that I can see what my advertising is doing, it is meaning that I am spending less there than I otherwise would. You know, I think there's been perhaps a little bit of a sort of wait and see what happens, or broadcaster VOD is inherently valuable because it is good quality content. But actually, you know, give us the data. Let us, you know, let us behave more digitally, and I think you'll do better. I also think with Barb, you know, Barb has been looking for a way to start measuring some of these video views for a long time and is struggling. They don't live up to the gold standard, and I don't think we should include them without them living up to the gold standard. But I don't understand why the TV community isn't engaging in that debate on what is a view and maybe coming up with a different metric, because there's a lot of confusion amongst marketers at the moment over what the different views are in the different places. I actually think the TV industry is massively invested in helping sort out some of that confusion. I think some of that would go to help you establish the reach and the frequency that you drive and all these other things. But I feel like the TV industry is often a little bit slow to do those things. So with the advantage of some really great digital products coming out of Sky.
And that is happening in other markets, it's worth saying. You know, in the US, we are working with the TV industry on measurement systems that work both across online and television. In Germany, that will be launched in January of next year. Here in the UK, we'd love to work with Barb and with the broadcasters on a way of actually ensuring that advertisers have got the data that they need. So
it's actually a more positive picture. And I think on that note, because we've only got about 10 minutes left, I'm going to open this up to questions from the floor, if there are any. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3. Who should we go to first? You, sir, yes, because you've got the microphone. That's
I've got a question for Ben. So you mentioned 75% of instances of identifying offensive content are via machine learning. You've got one of the most powerful machine learning capabilities in the world. Is 75% good enough, or should it be 99?
So we would absolutely aim for that. That was the last month's figures. I don't think 75% is good enough, and I think on that, in the same way, we would aspire to get to the same sort of levels that we've got in terms of copyright protection from a system that we have called Content ID, which allows us to accurately, very, very accurately identify intellectual property that's owned by anybody in this room and block it and remove it if it's on our platform. We are at the early stages in applying these machine learning elements to our to extremist content on the platform. I think the other thing that it's worth saying is this is a harder problem. There is, from a machine learning point of view, you know, making a match of is this frame from this piece of IP is a problem we've invested in over many, many, many years. But is a simpler problem than is this terrorist content? Because actually, and indeed, a number of papers ran with a screenshot of a piece of video that had been up on YouTube that was actually a Guardian video. But it happened to have a photo of some people from ISIS in it. And that was just the sort of screenshot that was taken and used in a number of publications. And so there's context. Clearly, in that context, that wasn't terrorism content. And so that, I think, will limit the 75%, but we want to get better.
Another question. Who? Yes. You say if we can get a microphone there.
Given how upsetting it is, I'm sure, for a brand owner to see their advertising alongside inappropriate content, I'm just curious as to what the feeling is amongst the marketing community now around allowing that to happen, and why would you allow yourselves to buy into a media that's clearly not able to control that environment?
I think I don't entirely agree with some of the premises in the question that you know, when the incident was brought to our attention, like everybody else's,
the two incidences in Argos's case,
we took action. We pulled our advertising, we started speaking to Google, ISBAR got very involved, and we had a number of sessions arranged where we could talk to Google and express our concerns and say what we needed. One of the fundamental differences for me was that before, and to be honest, I hadn't been 100% aware of this, beforehand, videos were sort of deemed to be safe until you knew that they were unsafe. And one of the key differences for me in the steps that were taken in March was that now videos are deemed to be unsafe until you know that they're safe. And so there were a number of measures that were put in place that I believe make it safer and actually safe. We do monitor it though, and if that were to change, we would pull our advertising again, we would go back to Google, and we would continue working with them. I mean, Google are a partner of ours, and just like ITV and Sky and various others, we try and work with our partners to find solutions. But I wouldn't put my advertising in an environment I thought was unsafe. The comment about the videos that are still there, is that they are still there, they're not advertised on. And that is a fundamental difference for me.
We were kind enough to get an email from Alexi during that period. I think you sent us a screenshot of an ITV ad for ITV Racing, I think, going in front of a Ku Klux Klan video. And look, our marketing team were gutted, and they've pulled advertising. We're not a big spender on YouTube, so it's not making a huge difference to Ben's business, but we've pulled it indefinitely until we can feel comfortable where we advertise. And
it's worth saying that there were brands that were never at risk because they were choosing to not to buy programmatically on YouTube. So Apple, all of Apple's spend on YouTube is on hand-picked selection of channels. It is not driven by an algorithm or other things. It's not the platform that puts you at risk. It was the way of buying. And what we've done, as Nicki identifies, is we've given brand advertisers more control, and we've done more in terms of flipping that presumption that a video is unsafe before it's made safe.
Another question. Probably got time for one more, I should think. Yeah, okay, there you go, number 2.
So I was Keith Underwood, Channel 4. I was heartened by the BCG slide that showed that traditional TV broadcasters can win in this marketplace. I just wondered what the panel thought could most frustrate this highly desirable outcome. Nicki mentioned the lack of common measurement standards and sort of siloed data pools. Is that the answer?
Not the only answer,
yeah,
but I think it would help.
I think it feels to me that we're approaching a moment, I think, in television, probably similar to when Barb was first kind of invented. The TV companies got together, created Barb, and Barb has been an incredible measurement system or a currency to trade against up until now, and will continue into the future. But at the same time, we are all as broadcasters building our own data play, and it feels to me, and Jacob said it earlier, that we needed to build a walled garden, and maybe I think the broadcasters need to collaborate a bit more and actually bring all of that data together and create a television data source, because advertisers don't want an individual relationship with broadcasters. If we could create something from television,
you're going to say something else. That's
right.
Why I was nodding.
But if I think we can create a television data platform so that we can offer advertisers more granular audiences, then we can offer the best of both worlds.
That's pretty much the end of the session, I think. There is one final thing to do, which is you have an app up there, because we're very, very modern. And a question is going to appear on the screen, which has, and we'd just like you to answer the question. The question is, which player will have the biggest impact on the TV advertising industry in the next 5 to 10 years? Is that the result? Have they done it already?
Oh. We're getting down.
So you need to, there you go, fire away. It's happening. This is incredibly exciting. If they could broadcast programs like this, it would save,
no problem.
It would save the broadcast industry, I think.
Oh, it's changing.
My goodness. Look at that. Well, It's looking to me, Ben, like you're going to be the winner there.
Excellent.
It's talking to, oh, God. I have watched more interesting paint. I didn't know it was going to be quite like this. I don't think this has been road tested as the big finish we were after. But anyway, that's clearly not going to, oh, it has changed, but it's just flipping about. The numbers aren't, and yeah. Has anybody else still got to press? That's the question. That's the question. So it looks like it's Google. Ben, are you very, very pleased about that, I imagine?
That was the only reason, obviously, for coming on the panel was to win the vote at the end. No, look, we are excited about working with the television industry. We're very excited about working with content producers, both on the traditional medium of television and in online, to make sure that there is a strong and vibrant revenue stream for people to make more great content.
Thank you very much indeed for listening. It's time for the next session now. Thank you.